Hello, everybody. So, yet again, Shoolini University taking forward the knowledge sharing session. Today, we have with us Miss Juanita Headley, and I hope, ma'am, I pronounced your name correct. So,
Yes, you did.
thank you so much. So, she's a licensed New York attorney and an international speaker, working as an unpaid volunteer for humanity from last more than 7 years, 7.5 years, and have shown a strong commitment to eradicate the modern slavery, as we call it. Ma'am have also two publications on her name. The first one is the sex trafficking in the 21st century, and the second is can you keep a secret. So I take this, I find myself to be very blessed, and I take this immense pleasure to welcome you, ma'am, on behalf of Shoolini University and especially School of Law. So over to you, ma'am, if you can tell our audience that what trafficking basically is, because when I belong to a country, India, where a certain taboo is attached to it. People know about it, but we don't talk much about it. So over to you, ma'am.
Most certainly. Thank you for having me, Monica. It's really a privilege and honor to be able to share with you once again and to be able to meet after being at the university late last year. For me, I take the definition, which is the Palermo Protocol, and I condense it down because I find that that definition, it is very long-winded, and individuals who do not understand law, who are not used to or versed in the area of trafficking and exploitation, will find it overcomplicated. And so I simply define exploitation as taking advantage of another human being for your own benefit or gain. And what I do is I give examples because I feel it's a lot easier for us to understand through examples. Unfortunately, because of movies like Taken, quite often people believe that human trafficking requires a person to be kidnapped. Or maybe they think about individuals who move from one country to another in the back of a truck or a lorry. In certain circumstances, that may be trafficking, but quite often it is indeed a smuggling case or issue. The way that I look at trafficking for myself, whenever you have men and women and they are having sex, they're engaging in sexual activity, you will have sex trafficking in that country, community, or neighborhood. Whenever you have individuals who are sick, who have ailments, who have health issues, in my opinion, you will have organ trafficking. And whenever you have restaurants, businesses, and establishments, you will have labor trafficking. In other words, it is taking advantage of another person for your own benefit. Let's imagine a community, a country, or a culture where men and women are completely celibate. That means they abstain from sexual activity. If that was the case, there would be no reason to have a brothel, there'd be no need for prostitution. In the same way, if there are individuals who are sick and do not have the financial means for a transfusion of blood, for organs, then that opens up the black market for exploitation of people's bodies for organ trafficking. We have to understand that trafficking is vast and wide, and it is very difficult for us to understand it because it comes in different forms, shapes, and sizes. It does not discriminate, it is an equal opportunity employer, regardless of your ethnic origin, your gender, your age, sexual orientation, religion, race, color, or creed. Any one of us, including myself, could be trafficked. And it does not require immigration. Too often, individuals believe that trafficking requires you to be moved from one country to another. That is not always the case. In fact, in the UK, statistics have shown that the vast majority of trafficking victims in the United Kingdom, which is a first world country, are indeed British citizens. And realistically speaking, let's imagine that I was in China. I'm British born, my parents are from the West Indies. We are not African, we are not American. My family originate from the West Indies or the Caribbean, which is very, very close to the United States. Now, if I was to go to China, although I am British born, my ethnic origin is Caribbean, therefore my skin color and my features are that of a Caribbean. If I was in China, I do not have Chinese features, I do not speak the language, I do not know the culture. I would stand out like a sore thumb. Logically, if an individual wanted to traffic a female for sex or labor in China, they would a lot more successful looking a Chinese person in China than someone who looks like me. Because immediately I would stand out. If a Chinese woman is trafficked in China, she knows the language, the community, the culture, and therefore, if the police raided that brothel, she would be able to communicate in her native tongue, Mandarin. This is not a brothel, Mr. Policeman. This is my boyfriend, my husband, my partner. If we bring it over to India, for example, let's say an individual is trafficked in Chennai. They speak Tamil. They understand the culture and the community of Tamil Nadu, and they understand the way to behave amongst those from that community. If they were taken to Delhi, they may not speak the local dialect. If they are taken to Kerala, they may not speak the local dialect. To those of us who are not Indians, we may think, well, they all look the same. As an Indian would tell you, there is differences in features, in language, in culture, despite it being one country. Therefore, even in India, if trafficking was to take place, it would make sense to traffic a Tamil-speaking person in Tamil Nadu rather than in Manipur, Agra, or Delhi.
Okay, Bam, thank you so much for that. So the one thing that comes to my mind is it important that the physical violence has to be involved when it comes to human trafficking?
I would say that it is not necessary for physical violence to be used for the purpose of exploiting a person. Having worked with survivors of human trafficking around the world, I have heard stories of them being brutalized, both male and female, females being raped, being tortured, being imprisoned, placed in confined spaces that may be a cage, a closet, a house, or a room. But we need to understand not every situation of trafficking requires or even utilizes physical violence. There are indeed trafficking victims who are not imprisoned, who have freedom of movement. Why is that? Because in my opinion, the imprisonment is in the mind. Now, there are many of us who may not understand that, but what I'm trying to explain here is that with certain victims of trafficking, the abuser, the exploiter, will say things to that person that places them in fear of their own safety or their own family members. Hypothetically, let me use myself as an example, and let's imagine I have family in the West Indies. Now, a trafficker may not use physical force to keep me in their confines, to keep me enslaved in trafficking, let's say labor trafficking, but if they threaten to kill my family members, I would comply. Therefore, we have to understand that not every threat requires sexual or physical violence. Psychological violence is very, very real. We have women who are victims of domestic violence, and that is when their spouse, partner, boyfriend, or girlfriend says things to them of a derogatory, harmful, or threatening nature. Although it is only verbal words that are used, never physical violence, that woman is being abused, and that woman may never leave that relationship, even though there was no violence being used. Often we as people, we undermine and don't consider physical abuse to be the same or equivalent as emotional abuse, but they very much are. In the UK, we have a song, "Sticks and stones can break my bones, and words will never harm me." What we have to understand, yes, physical harm can happen with sticks and stones, and you can be healed, but words are very powerful. I'm a born-again Christian, and I believe very strongly in the Bible. There are people of no belief, atheists of no religion, who do not believe in the Bible, but they believe similarly to the scripture that says there is life and death in the tongue. There are books that are being sold around the world by people of no religion who believe that scripture, life and death in the tongue, that scripture means there is life in our words. There is power in what we say. Of a man in Japan, he had 2 cups of rice. To one of the cups of rice, which was soaking in water, he spoke positive things. To the other glass of rice, he spoke negative things. The rice he spoke negative things grew mold. The rice he spoke positive things became sake, Japanese wine. There are even individuals who grow bamboo trees, who have plants and flowers and speak to them. It might seem bizarre, it might seem crazy, but at the end of the day, words have power. And that is one of the reasons why these traffickers and exploiters who do not use physical abuse use their words to keep that person confined. So we have to understand violence is physical. Those scars can be healed. But when a person says things to you, you start to believe that that can destroy your self-belief, sense of self-worth.
Strongly agreed, ma'am. Strongly agreed on that. Words are more dangerous or more harmful than the physical harm that we give or anyone gives to a person. The next thing that I just when I was hearing you right now, you use the term even the girlfriends or the you made it that even it's not important that only the female can be trafficked. The male partners can also be. So the thought that came to my mind that can you tell us that is trafficking more gender based or what is the ratio? If you can give us a ratio that this much ratio is of males and this much ratio is of females. So is it gender biased or not?
What I will say is that the statistics are always changing, and what we have to understand is human trafficking is hidden in plain sight. I read something quite recently on the internet. Unfortunately, I was so busy with work, I was unable to complete the reading, and I'm hoping I can find this article again. It was of a young girl who shared her story, which I saw on Facebook, and she said that I was being trafficked by my father. And from my knowledge and remembrance, I believe she was saying she was trafficked from childhood into her teenage years. Now, when she spoke about the trafficking she experienced, she said that people would have had no idea I was being trafficked. My father would take me to the amusement park, to the fun fair, to Disneyland. My father would take me to the restroom. And what he would do, he would leave me in the restroom, and then another man would come into the restroom and pretend to be looking for his daughter. And then he would take me by the hand, buy me an ice cream, and traffic me. What this girl is describing to us is trafficking hidden in plain sight. Let's imagine that we are in Mumbai and I'm in a restroom in Mumbai and there's a young girl in the stall beside me. Now she comes into the restroom by herself. Let's say she's 6 years of age. It is a female restroom, only females allowed. But then I hear a gentleman calling out, Amber, Amber, are you here? Or let's use an Indian name, Sunita, are you here? And he comes in and she says, yes, I'm here. She leaves the restroom, washes her hands, and she walks out with the man. Now, if I overheard that interaction, I would have no idea that girl was just sold for sex. If I was outside the restroom walking around, let's say that we're now in Kolkata, and I see an Indian man holding the hand of an Indian girl, and she's eating, let's say, paratha or naan, she's eating something, I'm not going to assume that he just bought her that because he's taking her to sex exploit her in a hotel. We have to understand that trafficking is very real. And my desire is not for us to become paranoid by that knowledge, it's for us to have our antennas out and to be alert. Sometimes, because we can be very naive, we will look at a man and a child, they're the same ethnic origin, we assume they're related or family friends. This is not always the case. Just because, let's say I'm 10 and I'm holding the hand of a Caribbean man who has similar features to me does not mean a friend or a relative. He could have just purchased me for sex. When we understand that, we can look at a situation and become more informed. I never use the term awareness. Awareness for me is knowing and doing nothing. For example, it is raining outside in England, and you saw the weather forecast. Awareness in my mind is knowing and doing nothing. My desire is to educate and empower people with the tools to act. We talk about awareness, awareness, awareness. Awareness is not changing anything, but when you have been empowered, you can make a difference to protect yourself. The statistics we have, they only tell us the information that we do know, but there are a lot of victims and survivors who are trafficked and don't even know that. This little girl would not have known she was being trafficked because that is her father. She would not have said she's being exploited because her dad is passing her on to other men, but she's just following her father's instructions. At the end of the day, it's hard for me to pinpoint what are the numbers today because the numbers are not the real reality. And when we become so bogged down with numbers, we're not understanding how huge and magnanimous this public domestic servitude. We have drugs and weapons. And what we have to understand is that those who are in the gang world, often they move amongst criminal activity. They may start with drugs, and then from drugs they move into selling women. Because of drugs and weapons, when you sell drugs, you need to purchase new ones. You need to get access to new drugs. When you sell weapons, you need to get access to new weapons. When you sell a person for sex or labor, you can sell them over and over and over again. However, statistics are now showing that labor trafficking is now on the increase. We have individuals from India and the Philippines who are being trafficked in the Middle East for construction and labor. What about men in the United Kingdom working at car washes? When we as British citizens go to get our car washed for a few pounds, when normally it would cost a lot more, you have to question, how much is this person earning? What about nail bars and nail salons, where we have women from China, often from Korea, Japan, do not speak a word of English? What about restaurants? All of those are forms of labor trafficking. Let's move to factories. Let's say Amazon. Amazon has factories around the world. An individual could be working in Amazon and could be trafficked. Amazon is not the trafficker. A trafficker will bring a person from Eastern Europe to the UK, give them legal documentation, they will go into them, it's going to their trafficker. What about women who beg on the street, men who beg on the street? That is also a form of trafficking. So it is not just sex, it is not just labor, it comes in many forms, but what we may not realize is that labor is indeed increasing. Philippines is #1 for cyber sex trafficking. We need to understand that cyber sex trafficking, it is not a Filipino problem, it is a world problem. And when we have men who desire sexual activity with another human being or a child, and we are on lockdown, they're going to find a way to satisfy their sexual needs. We have girls and boys being sold on the internet. We have teenagers selling child pornography of themselves, their siblings, friends, and family. I saw a recent article in the Philippines of a couple. They were 27 years of age in the Philippines. I believe they were in the island of Cebu. They had nieces, nephews, and I believe they may have had a child of their own. This couple were sexually exploiting these 3 children in their care. The children were aged from 2 until 10 years of age. These are their caregivers. It is hard for us to wrap our head around the fact that children are being sexually exploited by family members via webcam. This aunt and uncle, this couple were abusing these children via webcam for the pleasure and privilege of often Western men in the UK, Australia, Korea, etc. And so even though we have a lockdown and we may feel our children are safer because they're not being abused, there's no chance of kidnapping, there's no chance of rape, stranger danger, the reality is these crimes are now coming through the use of the internet. Technology is brilliant, technology is good, but it is being utilized often for immoral and even illegal and criminal purposes. So we need to understand that.
Thank you, ma'am. So another thing that I think needs our attention is that it becomes a bigger challenge when somebody known closer, as you said, the uncle or the aunties or the father, for that matter. Even I think that if father is dead, mother can be. So if these close relations are exploiting a child, or maybe a child has been exploited when they were a kid, and now they are into their teenagers or maybe grown. So what do you think the major challenges that that will come in front when we are trying to make this person understand that you have been trafficked and you are in mess? We are there to help you. How to convince that person that we are going to take you out of the situation and we are going to help you? How to do that?
What I would say first and foremost is that we have to use patience in all things. As I said earlier, strong Christian, and in the Bible, there's a scripture in 1 Corinthians 13 about love. It says, love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast. It is not rude, it is not self-seeking. Love is not easily angered. Love does not keep a record of wrongs, always hopes, always trusts, always perseveres. The sad reality is, regardless of a person's faith, the majority of people in the world do not know what love is. They get disrespected, abused, trafficked, exploited by somebody that allegedly loves them. Because with certain traffickers, when it comes to sex trafficking, they may enter into a relationship that is romantic in nature with that individual. In parts of South America, there are men who will meet a woman, date her, groom her, and marry her for the purpose of pimping her out. She would believe that she's feeding Juan and Jose, her two sons, and that's why she's selling her body, without understanding that in fact her husband is her pimp. There are other individuals, young girls and women, in romantic relationships with a male who says to them, for us to pay the bills, can you have sex with one friend? Can you have sex with a few more friends? And before she knows it, she is turned out into prostitution. The challenge with this is that this young lady, woman or girl, believes she is looking out for the family. She's looking out for the partner without realizing he is her pimp. The challenge we have is that the majority of victims do not identify as being victims. If they've been sexually abused by a family member in their childhood, when they're being abused by a trafficker or pimp, it's normal for them. I've worked in domestic violence. Some of the women do not leave the relationship because they're used to being beaten up. It becomes their normal. One of my clients even said to me, when a guy treated me like a gentleman, I didn't like it and I wasn't used to it, and the relationship didn't last. Now, please understand clearly, she did not enjoy being abused, but she was not used to being respected. She was not used to doors being opened for her, for the bill being paid for their meal in a restaurant. When a person does not have an honest reality, they have a reality of deception, where they have been deceived, lied to, coerced, under fraud. They do not understand truth. Truth is respect. Truth is love. Truth is patience. Often we don't realize that, and we make exceptions for a person's bad behavior. Often in life, we as people, myself included, we are impatient. We want that job, we want that relationship, we want those children, we want a son if we're in India. We have desires, but in life it requires patience. The challenge with victims, they're not identifying our impatience means they will never get the help. You need to meet them where they're at. If they say they love their trafficker, that is okay. You need to appreciate what they're saying, what they're feeling, and meet them on that level. Ask them questions. Why do you love him? How does he treat you? Do you like it when he shouts at you? Do you like it when he rapes you? Ask questions. Allow that survivor to come to the knowledge by themselves. Now, I know of a young girl who confided in me that she had taken nude photographs and sent them to a man on the internet. They were friends for about a year. He met her through social media, and he was talking to her and supporting her. When he asked for the nude photographs, she provided them. They eventually had sex. She was groomed. Grooming can be defined as preparation. Preparation for work, preparation for school, or preparation for sex. Grooming is when somebody does your hair, your nails, your makeup, takes you to the local restaurant, takes you to temple, pays for your mobile phone data, your internet. It's when someone does nice things to you for the purpose of exploiting. When I spoke to this girl, I told her, you were groomed. He is not a good guy. Many years later, she still believed he was a good guy. Now, what it is for me to get her to understand, I would have to bring her to that knowledge over a process of time very gradually. Because she was thinking about the 1 year they'd spent together in friendship, in just communication, in just interaction online. Pimps and traffickers can be very patient. They may groom you for 6 months to a year. If a pimp or trafficker will marry you, it will be very hard for you to tell that wife, that spouse, your husband is your pimp. So you have to get them to understand by comparing and contrasting. What about your friends? Do their husbands beat them? Do their husbands disrespect them? Yes or no? Do you think it's okay if your friend is treated like this? No, I don't think so. But your husband does that to you. You want them to come to the revelation by themselves. Telling a person to leave a relationship will not work. Insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. We need to understand that in all things, it requires time. A pimp or trafficker cultivating marijuana, it takes time. Getting access to weapons and guns, it takes time. Getting a young girl to send sexually explicit photographs over the internet, it takes time. Pimps and traffickers are patient. We need to be patient also in helping victims and survivors.
Exactly, because the survivor is being, as you said, that the survivor has been groomed in that way. So obviously that we must have much more patience to make them understand that you've been exploited over a period of time, and now we are there to help you. I strongly agree to that, ma'am.